So the Russians have always been a rather brutal nation, and therefore their monsters that they use to scare their little children, and probably one another, can be pretty terrifying as well. We thought it would be nice to present around spooky season some frightening Russian monsters, and if you're watching this after Halloween, it's alright, it's Halloween every day here, so spook-scribe with us and keep your life scary with our assistance. I'm Morticia, and Gomez is here to talk to you about Koschey the Deathless, one of the more terrifying villains of Russian folklore, because Gomez is Russian. And often I see videos about these things from people who are not Russian, and I thought, well, let's have someone who's really Russian, who grew up with this stuff, talk about it to you guys. It would be interesting. And we talked about Baba Yaga, who is the most frightful witch ever, and she's also Russian, of course. And we will link that in the description. If you did not see it, check it out. You need to know this in your life so that witches can be even scarier for you. If you thought you recovered from the Hansel and Gretel witch, you didn't, or you won't after you watch Baba Yaga. So, right now we're talking about Koschey the Deathless, and you know, if you're trying to understand Russian lore and you need to kind of put it with something you already understand, think about the skeleton kings. I started seeing in Halloween decor over the past few years skeletons sitting with a crown, and I didn't really get like the point of where is the connection of a king to a skeleton for Halloween. Like, it's something different. I guess there's only so much you can do with a skeleton, you know, because it's kind of hard to see their hair and eye color and all that with it all rotted away. So they started doing like yoga skeletons or bride and groom skeletons. I don't know, it's weird. Like, I guess Zen after death or something.
Yeah.
So, okay. But we're thinking like the Skeleton King, what is this about? And Koschey the Deathless, which Gomez will tell you, he looks very skeletal when he is imprisoned and starved, like pretty much a creepy skeleton that still won't die. And so he is also, isn't he a king?
Yes, some versions show him as such.
So then I thought, okay, Skeleton King, Koschey, and he was also probably the first skeleton of legend to be a prisoner in chains. And he's even creepier than the ones you just imagined that, you know, starved to death in prison or whatever, in the dungeons and the castles and were in chains. Like, that's creepy, but Koschey's even creepier. So, you know those references, they're familiar to you, but we're about to take them to a darker level. And in the name Koschey the Deathless, you can also refer to, like, Michael Myers of Halloween or Jason. Like, you know, you kill them and they just get back up. Like, they seem deathless, but Koschey, you can't even kill him for him to get back up. Like, it's not going to happen. So, yeah.
That's very true. He has a special set of conditions that would only allow a legendary hero to destroy him, which involves finding a special golden chest, and in that golden chest there is stored a bird, and if you're lucky enough and the bird doesn't fly away, then...
But it's gonna try, because it's been trapped in a chest forever. Like,
yeah, it
like,
is trying to get away, yeah. It's not even being malicious, and it won't bite you, it just will try to escape. Then after you catch it, and then you kill it, then it has inside of it is a special needle. And only if you happen to be so lucky that you don't lose the needle and you break it, then Koschey finally dies, because that is what is called the death of Koschey. That's how it translates from Russian. That is the specific condition, only with those things. And yet he always comes back in other fairy tales, just like Chucky, so...
Just like Chucky. So, you know, if you're trying to understand Koschey, think about Michael, Jason, Chucky, the Skeleton King, the prisoner in chains, and you're at least getting a little tiny start.
Very true. Koschey is a very complicated figure also, with various sources and theories. So, of course, in art and illustrations to traditional fairy tales, and in the oral tradition that predates the written tradition, he is shown, like Morticia said, as emaciated. He is a skeleton, and often he is in chains. His location can vary. Sometimes it is one of major characters in the fairy tale, such as Vasilisa or Yelena, that have him in chains, have custody over him. But enough times it's even the Baba Yaga that hides him away in her basement, attic, somewhere mysterious where you're not supposed to go, because just like Bluebeard with his wives, you'll be punished. But people always go there and always release him. He has a very good skill of persuasion. And possibly it has to do with the fact that he doesn't really lie, he keeps his promise. If you release him from his chains, And if you also happen to give him what he needs, which it usually involves several buckets of water, the number of the buckets vary from fairy tale to fairy tale, from 3 to 6 to 9 to 12, also mystical numbers that you would see in Greek mythology, but that's a different story. But anyway, after you give him the buckets, then he will probably give you some kind of favors, and he has many to offer. He can make the typical things that a villain with special powers would give you. He could give you a pretty maiden, he would make you stronger, he might make you undefeatable. Most likely though, the things that people seem to ask the most for are riches and a kingdom of their own. So he just provides, but eventually he ends up ruling himself somehow. He has that kind of a trickery. So as far as his operations go, unlike the Baba, he never really seems to be part of the culture. The Baba can be related, as we covered in the other video, she can be related to major characters, she can be sort of aloof, but still kind of a part. She's considered as the grandmother of witches. But Koschey, on the other hand, is very different, and they're both sometimes villains, but he is a more distinct villain. He is the evil villain. He does not have redeeming qualities, he does not have charming animals to keep him company, he has vicious horses just like she does sometimes, and usually they eat flesh, or they can travel really fast. He always
like
has...
the Headless Horseman's horse.
Yeah. And he has many other attributes too, but all of them, all of his, in contrast to Baba, they are always on the negative side. They're always doing something destructive, to kill somebody, to maim somebody, to overcome somebody, nothing positive the way she does. So that is his special nature as a villain. And
so what about if he gives you what you want? Will he still take it from you and end up killing you after, or does that person at least get something like...
Usually it seems that whoever deals with him, they don't fare well, but the reasons for them not faring well are also different. Sometimes it's him who betrays them, or they want more than he is willing to give, or even something entirely neutral circumstance. For example, the true hero of the fairy tale would come and destroy them because they're on the way to him, or they could just be accidentally hurt. Even if he's not trying to destroy them, they would still be destroyed by virtue of alliance. So I guess if
like you let him out, you're bad, you're dead too, bye-bye.
Yeah, something happens. Something always happens to them. They never just chill and get to live
That's
there.
why you shouldn't deal with completely evil people, just some that can be either way, like us or Baba Yaga.
Yes. She can deal with you. You can find some terms that she would satisfy her. With Koshey it's more difficult. Even his gifts are not useful. And he is very interesting because even his name is also contested, just like the name of Baba Yaga herself. He's also pretty old. And the earliest usages of this name I found in the 12th century, and they belong to regular people, but with one characteristic. Whatever they were always an outsider to Russian culture.
Like a foreigner?
Yeah. And I guess there could be, some people would see here an element of racism, but the Koschey always has that element of otherness, of being an intruder, foreigner, a foreign kind of invader, foreign sorcerer, a foreign king. And that's why some people speculated that maybe originally he was some kind of a slave, or like a captive from a different nation, or he stayed in captivity for so long that maybe he even forgot his homeland. But basically, however you look at it, somehow he's an outsider. He's trying to mitigate for his outsider status with different interesting actions. The most typical of them would be to rule a particular Russian sub-kingdom, or he would try to steal himself a maiden. He's known for stealing maidens. Sometimes he does it for his body, the three-headed dragon called Zmei Gorinich. Sometimes he does it for
That's like the Russian version of Ghidorah.
Yes.
Love it.
Yes. And usually he does it for himself, and he often has the tools to do it with his sorcery and his fast horses. His horses are usually faster somehow.
Faster than a speedy Koshey horse.
Very true. and the only way to defeat him usually has to acquire either through bravery and cunning, or to acquire special tools that only the Baba Yaga offers. And then if you use those tools, such as faster horses, mightier swords, you can disable him, but you cannot kill him still, because we already mentioned that only special set of conditions, and even then he still survives somehow.
So is she ever seen, the Baba Yaga, is she ever seen to be his friend or anything, or is she always like trying to hold him back, like I'm bad but he's worse?
Sometimes she's seen as his ally, but it doesn't usually last, because they're both powerful beings. They usually come into some kind of antagonistic relationship. There are very few select fairy tales that mention them working together, but even it doesn't last to the end
This
of
spooky story is only big enough for one of us.
Yeah, exactly. Can't have both. And his name is interesting enough. Also, some people speculate that the name Koshey is derived from the ancient Russian or Slavonic even word for a bone, because he represents also some kind of a dead influence, either himself being a skeleton, it makes sense. Other people trace it etymologically to the word for riches, and with him being a king occasionally, it also makes sense. Maybe he could be like a king that lost his riches.
I like to think bone, it just feels better for me. Like if I have to pick one, I like that.
Yeah, I like that too, because it seems mythologically appropriate.
So when he drinks the water, he becomes like a human looking again, non-emaciated.
Yes, it seems that way. I suspect that the two of them, him and the Baba, might be of the opposing elemental nature. He seems water makes him stronger, where fire and earth make her stronger. And she consorts with certain creatures representative of the fire element, such as the Russian phoenix, that we call the firebird. And the Koschei seems to deal with creatures that might have some connection to watery bodies, such as the three-headed serpent or dragon, alternatively, and other similar creatures that are more mystical.
So does he wear armor when he is fully? I thought he had armor somewhere, but
yeah, he dons armor. He doesn't always put it right away. Sometimes you see him in art with armor. In the famous painting by a Russian painter Vasilitsov, you see him sort of being in armor and wearing his crown. So presumably the armor signifies his transformation after he already changed his status from being a mere captive to being the king with all the powers. After he has been fortified, then the armor seems to be on him. But before that, he could just be a skeleton in chains. In some sense, there's maybe a symmetry between the chains being metallic in nature that hold him and his armor, where he controls the metal that holds him. And
he's like Mumra the ever-living.
Yeah, exactly. And some of my Serbian colleagues pointed out that there was a creature in their folklore that is reminiscent of the Koshey. It's called Koschchey. It's a regular two Serbian words that mean together iron head. And it seems likely they do share some attributes, but then I found another interesting connection. That a similar creature first appeared in the Turkish fairy tales. And it occurred to me that, of course, the Ottoman Empire, being the Turkish, had a chance to encounter historically the Serbian kingdom and conquer it or fight against it when they couldn't. And so there was some kind of a contact between them. And I suspect that maybe if that is true, that they are somehow related, that could be one reason why people place them together, Koschchey and the Koshey, but they both have that precursor that is the iron-head sorcerer from 40 Turkish fairy tales. And he doesn't display all of the powers of either of the creatures, but he shares some of their attributes, their visual characteristics, and the supernatural power. And the fact that it's a creature that is also a sorcerer, kind of like a sorcerer ogre, one may say, to be fanciful. So that is one version of his origins that I found, and another one is through folkloric blending with a different character. we already mentioned how certain saints acquire different attributes, can be deified or demonized in some cases. You probably know it from Celtic mythology as the gadget Bridget being compared to the saint Bridget. And the same happened, of course, in Russian mythology and folklore, where there was a particular saint called John Cassian. And then he lost his first name in the Russian version, and they started referring to him as just Cassian. And the day that was made holy to him somehow seemed to have blended with kind of a Koschey day, basically. The day started being associated with all kinds of evil luck because of historical financial reasons that would be beyond this video. But basically the point was that it became seen in negative light, and some of the attributes of this saint became associated with the demon and started being compared to the Koschey.
I guess Cassian kind of sounds like Koshey word-wise. Not exactly, but it's
That's kind of what I was thinking myself. So
because we think alike, Moshe.
Oh, kind of me, yeah. So yeah, that's where I started seeing similarities, and then Koshey acquired that other power that was not originally his in fairy tale, but because of folklore, where he puts the evil eye on you.
The stink eye.
Yes. And then people started noticing, those who study mythology, that he may be compared to the god Balor of Celtic mythology. But anyway...
So what is the date? Like, it's Friday the 13th here for the ill luck day. That's our favorite day ever, but like...
yeah, there it was the 28th of February.
Ooh, the last day of the month.
Yes, and that was the reason that it coincided with certain rules of the Tsar and the people being poor, and I guess they would see it as their money is being taken for taxation, so they started considering it to be a day of bad luck.
I wonder if that's when misrule ends. I have to look. I know it's like the time of misrule, but I can't remember when the season of misrule ends. That would be interesting. Not at all Russian, but just like interesting.
Well, those connections seem to work universally, because even when you look at the set of conditions for the Koshchey's death, they're pretty universal too. The needle could be representing things like the sword and the iron that binds the fairies. The egg that is used to hold the bird sometimes is basically the cosmic egg of creation. So there are all kinds of general patterns that the Russian fairy tales eventually accumulate through folkloric blending. So that is also very interesting to study, and especially you notice that the typical Russian names are not necessarily used in those fairy tales, but are replaced with the traditional, actually Greek names, because all the Russian names that sound like Russian, they're actually either usually Hebrew or Greek in origin. So then you see that there are general patterns there. Even the names that are seen as typically Russian, like Vasilisa and Yelena, they're of course Greek in origin, Vasilisa being related to Basileus. So, very interesting.
As in a basilisk.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, exactly, because it's the word for king in Greek.
And basilisk is king of the serpents. I like to see basilisk as a lizard, because lizards would be king of snakes, you would think. Like, they're still reptilian, but more.
Yeah. So
we're just saying everything goes back to the Greeks, if you're like, where are you going? Sometimes we don't know what happened, but this time...
Just like in a fairy tale, there is this thing where you have to choose 3 roads, and they both lead you usually to somewhere strange or evil in this case, until you overcome the obstacle. So that's how we roll. We have these 3 directions that we move in, and we don't know where, and we let the ball of yarn guide us.
Are we talking about Russians or us when we're discussing stuff?
That's the Russian fairy tale pattern that we seem to be following.
Okay.
So.
All of it all applies, just like we were saying earlier.
Yes, that's why I'm enjoying it. So yeah, you have several theories of the Koschey origin. We can trace it to the Serbs and the Turks, we can trace it to the typical Russian.
Which is nice to see, like, the interconnectedness of the world, because you're going like, okay, you can't just say this is straight and this is what this has to do with this and that's it. It's like, yeah, it connects to this and this and this, because the world and the patterns of the world are so interconnected.
Yes.
And it makes it fascinating, because nothing is ever just, and it all comes from something else that came from something before it, etc.
And it's very difficult, nobody knows, of course, for sure. People that there are many videos about the Koschey, but most of them are not really certain. They seem certain, but the truth is that we don't really know, because most of the fairy tales that we work with, they have only been written down in around 1800s, and before that there was the oral tradition that has not been even documented. So we are basically guessing, but our guesses are educated.
The Russians and the Druids had the oral tradition in common, where everything's passed down.
Yes.
So, since I'm Irish and he's Russian, I like to say, like, yeah, they're the same, really, because they are. Like, they can both drink you under the table. We rarely do anymore, but they can. And we both have our stories and our awesome heroes and monsters.
Yes, spectacular.
Or spooktacular.
Spooktacular. So here it is, Koshey explained for your entertainment. There are many more Slavic and Russian monsters that you probably didn't even heard the name of. There are a lot of them less known. Some of them are used in famous games like The Witcher, others are not. So if you have any questions, I will try to answer to the best of my ability.
And maybe next year we'll do some more monsters, and in between this year and next year, maybe we can do some that were specifically in The Witcher, and then you can give the real down low on them. Because you can watch a little bit like more organized videos on this, but again, they're not giving you all the connections, and this is from the perspective of a real Russian who did the research and grew up hearing this stuff as a child, so I think it makes it more authentic and interesting. So we hope you enjoyed. We hope you will never see a Skeleton King again in the same light. And until next time,
stay spooktacular, my friends.